Welcome back to the radio. Tonight, you find yourself in a world that hums with quiet anticipation, a world where every flicker of light carries the weight of patience and the faint thrill of achievement. Somewhere in the year 2149, you finally coaxed the last generator awake, and for the first time in what feels like ages, the lights stretch across the empty corridors with a gentle, steadfast glow. It's the kind of victory that doesn't need cheering, except maybe a small, dry chuckle when you realize you're now the most celebrated person in a room with no audience, except perhaps the blinking control panels that clearly don't care about your heroics. What time is it where you are? And which quiet corner of the world are you tuning in from tonight? Perhaps your room smells faintly of coffee or clean sheets, or maybe the city hums softly beyond your window. Either way, welcome. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to Quilloren Radio so you never miss out on new stories each night. Without further ado, let's begin. You step onto the metallic walkway that leads to the generator, your boots echoing softly against the cold steel. The air carries a faint tang of ozone, mingling with the warmth from the vents that hum with life. Each step feels deliberate, measured, like a small ritual that has carried you through countless nights. The walkway tilts slightly underfoot in places, the plates uneven, reminding you that maintenance is often more hopeful than perfect. A loose panel near the edge wobbles slightly as you pass it, and for a moment, you consider that it might have a mind of its own. Perhaps it enjoys startling the occasional visitor. The sky outside is a muted gray, filtered through the haze of the distant city, and the sun, or what remains of it after years of energy rationing, casts a faint silver glow on the horizon. Wind brushes against your cheeks, carrying the scent of distant rain mixed with the faint metallic note of the facility. You pause for a moment, hands resting lightly on the rail, and listen. The generator hums quietly in the distance, a low, reassuring pulse that feels almost alive. You notice a small panel of blinking lights near the entrance, each one cycling with mechanical precision, and you can't help but imagine that they're having a private conversation among themselves. As you approach the main entrance, the corridor widens, revealing the bulk of the facility. The walls are lined with conduits, cables snaking along their lengths, like careful veins delivering vital energy. Every surface bears the soft scars of years of use, scratches, faded paint, smudges where hands have lingered. A faint draft rises from an air vent overhead, bringing with it the crisp scent of recycled air that is somehow both sterile and comforting. You step carefully over a slight puddle of condensation near the doorway, marveling at the quiet absurdity that even in this highly controlled environment, the floors refuse to remain perfectly dry. The hallway ahead stretches into soft shadows, illuminated by the occasional strip of functioning lights. You move slowly, savoring the deliberate cadence of your steps. The boards underfoot creak in response to your weight, a gentle, almost musical protest that punctuates the otherwise still space. Somewhere ahead, a panel clicks quietly, as though affirming your presence. You realize that even in silence, the facility communicates, and you are fluent in its subtle language of hums, whirs, and soft mechanical sighs. Turning a corner, you notice a control console slightly ajar, one of its panels leaning at a lazy angle. You approach, brushing a fine layer of dust from the surface, and note the small, incongruous detail of a sticky note still clinging to the edge. It reads simply, "Remember to smile." You pause, letting a soft chuckle escape, amused at the human touch in a place defined by steel and circuits. For a moment, the world outside fades entirely, leaving only the quiet companionship of machinery and the slow rhythm of your own breath. You pass a narrow staircase that leads to a lower platform, the steps worn smooth from countless ascents and descents. Each tread offers a subtle resistance under your feet, a tactile reminder of repetition and diligence. The air grows cooler as you descend, carrying with it a hint of oil and heated metal. From somewhere below, a faint vibration courses through the floorboards, resonating in your chest. It is both grounding and oddly calming, a reminder that the generator is alive, humming its steady song beneath your careful watch. At the bottom of the stairs, a set of heavy doors waits, their surfaces scratched and dented in patterns that suggest long-forgotten maintenance adventures. You push them open with gentle effort, noting the soft squeak of hinges that have resisted lubricant for months. The room beyond is a cathedral of machinery, vast and cavernous, bathed in the faint glow of indicator lights. Towers of control panels stretch toward the ceiling, their displays flickering with soft, reassuring colors. The smell of heated metal and faint ozone mingles with the underlying scent of cleaning agents applied with meticulous care. You take a moment to pause in the center of the room, letting your senses settle. The floor beneath your boots is a patchwork of textures, smooth metal in some places, roughened grates in others. Every surface seems to hum with latent energy, an unspoken promise that the life of the facility continues even in the absence of human chatter. You notice a small, almost imperceptible vibration underfoot, a rhythm that matches your own pulse after the brisk walk down the stairs. You allow yourself a wry thought, only you could find the heartbeat of a machine somehow more comforting than the streets outside. Moving closer to the main generator unit, you feel the weight of history in the room. Every scuff, every faded label, every soft whir tells a story of long hours, quiet diligence, and the relentless passage of time. You lean lightly against a railing, observing the network of pipes and conduits that converge on the generator, like roots feeding a massive, metallic tree. Somewhere in the distance, a fan clicks on and off, a metronome keeping time with the steady pulse of the machinery. You imagine that even the fan has opinions about your work, silently judging the precision of your footsteps. Finally, you reach the generator itself, its surface warm under your touch, humming steadily as though acknowledging your presence. You trace your fingers along its casing, feeling the subtle vibrations that speak of contained energy and potential. A panel flickers to life at your nudge, confirming that the system is responding exactly as it should. You pause, eyes scanning the softly illuminated dials and meters, noting the orderly chaos of blinking lights. One of them, stubbornly orange despite your best efforts, seems to wink at you as if sharing an inside joke about the absurdity of being the last person responsible for keeping the lights alive. You step back slightly, taking in the entire scene, the quiet grandeur of the room, the steady hum of the generator, the occasional click and whir that punctuates the calm. The air smells faintly of metal, oil, and a hint of warmth that rises from the machines. In this stillness, the world narrows to this one room, this one purpose, and the gentle absurdity of your role. You allow a quiet smile to form, acknowledging that in a world defined by scarcity and silence, you have found a moment of controlled, deliberate life. For a final pause, you lean against the railing again, listening to the gentle cadence of the generator, the subtle vibrato of pipes and panels, and the faint, almost imperceptible hiss of cooling vents. Somewhere, a loose cable brushes against the floor with a soft metallic sigh, as though offering its own dry commentary on your progress. You shake your head gently, amused, and step forward, ready to move deeper into the heart of the facility. The space is still, the hum steady, and the weight of quiet responsibility feels almost meditative, a rhythm that you can follow without haste, without worry, simply with presence. The generator room stretches before you, a combination of meticulous engineering and quiet absurdity. You take a breath, feeling the mix of cool air, metallic warmth, and the subtle pulse of energy beneath your fingertips. A soft thought drifts through your mind. In a world built on survival and scarce electricity, someone has to appreciate the comedy of a blinking orange light that refuses to cooperate. You smile again, a small, private acknowledgement of humor amidst the hum, and step closer to begin the slow, deliberate work that will make the lights truly shine. A faint tang of ozone lingers in the air as you wipe a thin layer of condensation from a nearby panel. The smell drifts upward, settling in your senses with a familiarity that seems almost ancestral, like a memory you didn't know you had until now. You inhale deeply, and suddenly the hum of the generator becomes less a machine and more a bridge to another time. The sharp scent reminds you of early mornings in a city that no longer exists, when streets were alive with muted traffic, and the smell of freshly baked bread curled around corners like an unspoken invitation. You can almost feel the cracked pavement under your own shoes, worn down in patches by thousands of casual steps that carried people to work, to school, or simply across the park to nowhere in particular. You remember a morning in particular. The sun was low, casting long, golden shadows across the sidewalk. You had paused at a corner to watch a flock of pigeons scatter as a cyclist passed, the wheels humming against the asphalt in a rhythm that seemed both intrusive and musical. A neighbor called out to someone down the block, their voice faintly carrying across the space between buildings. There was no urgency in it, only the soft, habitual greetings that threaded people together in ways too quiet to notice in the bustle of the day. A newspaper, folded neatly under your arm, smelled of ink and dust and carried the faint heat of the press. You recall the subtle absurdity of it all, grown adults navigating complex social structures, pausing to greet strangers, and yet never questioning why they liked the feel of paper against their fingers more than any device could ever offer. The memory drifts with the warmth of sunlight falling across your shoulder. You see a cat lounging on a stoop, its fur gleaming, its tail flicking lazily as it surveyed the scene. The cat doesn't care that you're there, and neither do you, but for a moment, your attention is captured by its indifferent grace. There is a subtle humor in watching a creature so self-contained, aware of everything but invested in nothing, as though mocking the careful calculations of human life. You recall laughing softly at it, standing there with the newspaper pressed to your chest, feeling the small absurdity of waiting for the light to change while knowing that a cat would never wait at all. Nearby, a vendor was arranging bread on a stand, the smell of warm dough mingling with the faint tang of ozone that always seemed to leak from the corner power transformer. The air carried a crisp edge, the kind that hinted at the slow progression of seasons rather than any sudden change. You remember noting, almost with a dry inner smile, that even amidst the daily rituals, people were consistent in their little quirks. The way the vendor adjusted the angle of the bread, the subtle shuffle of shoes against concrete, the careful arrangement of a display that no one outside the block would ever see. All of it was inconsequential. Yet in that morning it carried the quiet weight of ordinary beauty. A bus rumbled past, its engine vibrating under the asphalt, and, for a split second, you were aware of the contrast, the soft rhythm of the generator humming beneath your fingers now, versus the distant pulse of a machine ferrying passengers to their destinations. You remember pressing your hand against the cool metal of the bus stop railing, feeling its warmth rising from the sun, and noticing a faint scuff where someone had once leaned, their impatience or thoughtlessness recorded subtly in the shape of the surface. The memory is precise in its smallness, a detail you carry now, the way one carries a pebble found in a shoe, a minor weight, yet present. You step forward slightly, the present hum of the generator mingling with the memory, blurring the edges of time. The temperature in the room shifts subtly as a vent clicks on, carrying a small puff of warm air that brushes your cheek like a reminder of motion, of life continuing. The memory of that city morning fades gently, replaced by the measured rhythm of the lights and panels around you. You notice the way the soft glow reflects off the metal, the faint pulse of the machinery syncing with your own heartbeat. Even the loose cable that wobbled yesterday now seems patient, as though it understands that time in this room is expansive, unhurried, and entirely yours to observe. A soft whistle of recycled air drifts past your ear, carrying with it the faint scent of heated metal and oil. It reminds you of that first sip of coffee on the cracked stoop outside a tiny cafe, the warmth bleeding into your fingers, grounding you in the moment. There was a quiet absurdity in holding that warmth in your palms while the city moved around you, indifferent and unaware. You can smile now, recalling the small comedic timing of life. A dog barking at a butterfly, a bus driver sneezing mid-turn, a stranger dropping a coin with no concern, and yet all of it forming a perfect, imperfect harmony. Your eyes trace the conduit lines stretching toward the ceiling, following their intricate paths like you once followed the twisting streets of your city, curious about where each corner led, what sounds lay hidden around the next bend. The memory leaves behind a residue of quiet reflection, that life is measured in small moments, in the mundane rituals, in the unnoticed gestures that anchor us to our own existence. You inhale again, letting the hum of the generator fill your lungs with purpose, a subtle smile tugging at the corners of your mouth. A faint vibration hums beneath your boots, reminding you of the pulse of that morning bus, the vibrations of the earth carried subtly through pavement, through metal, through your own body. You allow the memory to dissolve completely now, leaving only the present, the soft whir of cooling fans, the warm metal of the generator, the gentle shift of air in the cavernous room. Everything is still, steady, and quiet. There is an odd comfort in the transition. The past has left a soft imprint, yet it does not intrude. It lingers, a gentle companion to the hum of now. You step closer to a panel, brushing a finger along the smooth surface, noting the faint warmth left from hours of operation. The memory of city mornings, sunlit streets, and quiet absurdities settles softly in your mind like dust on a ledge, present, acknowledged, and comfortably distant. Outside, the faint gray of the sky seems to echo the stillness of this room, the world beyond reduced to background, almost irrelevant. You let your shoulders drop, breathing in time with the slow cadence of machinery and your own pulse, allowing the soft humor of remembered moments to coexist peacefully with the calm of your present task. A panel clicks softly, a meter flickers, and somewhere in the distance, the generator hums with measured insistence. The room is warm, still, and alive in its subtle mechanical way. You lean back slightly, absorbing the quiet weight of accumulated memories alongside the gentle insistence of the machine. There is no urgency here, no requirement to act beyond being present. The scent of ozone, the warmth of metal, the faint vibration beneath your feet, all of it forms a bridge from who you were, who you are, and the quiet life you hold now. You smile faintly at the thought of that city morning, the small absurdities that defined it, and the faint humor hidden in human rituals. You shift your gaze to the softly illuminated panels ahead, feeling the gentle hum vibrate through the soles of your boots. The memory lingers like a quiet shadow, fading further with each passing second, leaving only calm, measured awareness. You are here, in this room, alive, in the rhythm of machines, anchored in the subtle warmth of the generator and the gentle echo of a life remembered without longing. You move along the perimeter of the generator room, pausing at a small console where a flickering screen displays softly scrolling data. A crackle comes through the radio, low and steady, the voice of a distant coworker greeting you with calm familiarity. "Morning," they say, almost conversationally, as though checking in on the day rather than issuing instructions. You respond in kind, your voice soft but clear, noting the slight rasp from the recycled air. There is no urgency, only a quiet rhythm to the exchange, a comforting reminder that even in isolation, someone is aware of your presence. The coworker mentions a minor anomaly in a distant sector, the tone casual as though reporting a new coffee blend rather than a technical hiccup. You let a faint chuckle escape, commenting lightly that it's remarkable how certain machines are persistent in their quirks. There is no need for solutions yet. Observation is enough. Outside the radio, the hum of the generator continues, a constant background companion, steady and reassuring. You glance at the blinking lights on the console, noting with mild amusement that one stubborn indicator seems to defy logic entirely, flickering in a pattern you suspect is purely ornamental. You take a slow step toward a small side corridor, passing a storage nook filled with neatly stacked boxes of spare parts. The scent of oiled metal mixes with a faint trace of cleaning solvent. From the radio, a soft sigh of relief travels through the static as your coworker remarks that they finally brewed a cup of coffee. You note the small absurdity in that detail, the ritual of coffee, a minor triumph, yet it resonates across the distance like a signal of normalcy. You respond with a brief, dry acknowledgement, and for a moment the space between you seems to shrink, measured only by the length of sound waves in the air. As you continue, a low vibration from the floor punctuates your steps, syncing in subtle rhythm with the occasional click of a panel or valve. You notice a small monitor displaying distant readings, and make a casual observation aloud, about a meter that seems to prefer drifting slowly upward. Your coworker responds with a soft laugh, noting that perhaps the meter enjoys its newfound freedom. The humor is quiet, observational, a shared recognition of absurdity in machinery that never complains, never demands, yet somehow entertains those who spend long hours in its company. A slight whistle from a vent draws your attention, the sound mingling with a faint hiss from a nearby conduit. You comment lightly on the vent's tendency to whistle like a disinterested bird, and your coworker agrees with a soft, amused tone. There is no conversation beyond this small observation, yet the exchange settles comfortably in the room, adding warmth to the still, metallic environment. You move closer to a panel displaying routine diagnostics, noting the gentle green glow as reassuring rather than urgent. In the quiet, it feels like the machinery itself is acknowledging your presence, responding in kind to the calm you bring. You pass a narrow doorway that leads to a maintenance alcove. Tools are arranged with meticulous care along the wall, each resting in a place chosen not by necessity but by habit and preference. You run your fingers lightly along a familiar wrench, noting the slight warmth from previous use, and comment quietly to yourself that the tool seems happier than usual today. Outside, the radio carries a soft murmur of acknowledgement from your coworker, almost as if they understand the subtle humor in conversing with objects. You pause, savoring the stillness and the gentle rhythm of the exchange, feeling the room unfold around you without urgency. A faint light shifts as a sensor recalibrates, casting shadows along the metallic walls that stretch like soft silhouettes. You remark to your coworker about the subtle artistry of the shadows, noting how each flicker seems accidental yet entirely precise. They respond with a dry, gentle joke about how future historians will likely misinterpret these shadows as intentional decorations rather than the random consequences of functional design. The laughter is low, unhurried, and shared over distance, forming a quiet bond between two people connected by routine, observation, and a subtle appreciation for the absurdity of machinery. As you walk past a row of cooling fans, a soft hum rises in resonance with the generator, a faint vibration running through the floor. You comment on how the fans are probably conspiring to see who can make the least amount of noise, and your coworker laughs quietly in agreement. The humor is unobtrusive, embedded in observation rather than performance, a dry acknowledgement of the tiny absurdities that fill long hours. The room feels alive, not with drama, but with attention. The flickering lights, the soft vibrations, the occasional whistle of air, all part of a rhythm that is entirely predictable, yet endlessly comforting. You stop at a small table holding a cup of water left behind, the surface faintly damp from condensation. You lift the cup, noting the faint chill against your fingers, and pass a soft comment to your coworker about the water's stubborn coldness despite the warmth of the room. The radio carries a soft, amused acknowledgement, a subtle laughter that travels the distance. You sip slowly, feeling the cool liquid steady your thoughts, grounding you further in the calm cadence of the environment. Each moment is small, deliberate, unhurried, yet fully observed, creating a sense of quiet companionship despite the solitude. A panel near the far end of the room flickers softly, and you note its persistence aloud, imagining that it's slightly mischievous in its resistance to conformity. Your coworker responds with a gentle observation about the odd personalities machines seem to acquire after decades of use. The humor is quiet but resonant, a reminder that even in the most controlled spaces, imperfection has its place. You move closer to the panel, brushing a finger lightly along the smooth surface, feeling the faint warmth of electricity and the hum of contained energy. The generator hums steadily beneath your boots, a constant pulse that threads through the conversation, the air, the walls, and the faint vibrations underfoot. You remark softly about the generator's composure, how it never complains, and your coworker offers a muted chuckle in return. The connection is quiet, grounded in shared observation rather than necessity. You continue your slow walk along the perimeter, noting the subtle patterns of blinking lights, the occasional hiss of vents, the steady pulse of energy coursing through metal veins. Each observation is acknowledged, gently, over the radio, building a layer of comfort that is more felt than spoken. Finally, you pause near the center of the room, letting the generator's warmth rise to meet you. The radio falls quiet for a moment, both ends absorbing the subtle stillness. You speak softly, noting the hum of the space, the faint odors of metal and oil, the calm rhythm of machinery that insists upon life even in isolation. Your coworker responds with a gentle comment about the pleasure of quiet mornings, the humor in routine, and the joy in knowing that both of you share this understated existence. The room feels warmer, not in temperature but in presence, the calm exchange folding softly into the hum of the generator, a quiet acknowledgement that even in the solitude of 2149, companionship persists in small, observed moments. As you step away from the generator's central hum, your mind drifts naturally to life before this room became the axis of your existence. It isn't nostalgia in the grand, sentimental sense. It's more a gentle recognition that things were once different, shaped by ordinary routines now softened at the edges by memory. You recall a time when the streets were crowded, and the air smelled of roasted coffee and exhaust in equal measure. The city moved in a constant rhythm that you once found both comforting and mildly absurd, the way traffic lights blinked in precise indifference to human urgency. You remember standing at a crosswalk, watching the same pattern of cars and pedestrians repeat itself daily, each iteration slightly imperfect, each day slightly warmer or cooler than the last. There was a quiet humor in the consistency, a subtle acknowledgement that life, even when ordinary, always found a way to surprise in minor, inconsequential ways. Before you took on the responsibility of the last generator, you worked elsewhere, in a building that seemed impossibly tall at the time. The elevator ride to the upper floors hummed with a mechanical patience similar to the generator now, its polished panels reflecting fluorescent light and faint fingerprints of people long forgotten. You remember pressing the button for your floor, half expecting it to groan in protest, and finding, instead, the gentle inevitability of motion. The floors themselves carried a faint smell of polished stone mixed with faint traces of coffee, a scent that has followed you in memory, lingering like a soft echo. You recall tapping your badge against the scanner, the click sounding louder than it should have in the otherwise quiet lobby. There was humor in the exaggeration of sound, a reminder that even the most controlled environments have their quirks, their subtle, human, approved absurdities. Your desk sat near a window where sunlight spilled unevenly across paperwork and the edge of a keyboard. The letters on the keys were slightly worn, faded by fingers that didn't always hit them correctly the first time. You remember the sensation of the plastic beneath your fingertips, smooth and occasionally sticky with remnants of long forgotten snacks. The office hummed with low, consistent noise, printers warming up, distant conversations filtered through partitions, the occasional cough or laugh that drifted down the hall. You recall glancing at a colleague's mug, emblazoned with a mildly cynical slogan, and thinking that its humor was slightly misplaced in a world that still operated on human schedules, deadlines, and meetings that could have been emails. On lunch breaks, you would wander the streets outside, feeling the uneven texture of sidewalks beneath worn shoes. The smell of warm bread from bakeries, faint exhaust from passing vehicles, and occasional whiffs of cut grass from tiny urban parks combined into a landscape that was ordinary and yet fully immersive. You recall one particular day, a stray paper airplane gliding past and landing neatly in the fountain at the plaza's center. It was absurd, perfectly trivial, yet it punctuated the otherwise orderly rhythm of life in a way that made you pause and smile quietly. You remember the gentle breeze brushing your face, the faint warmth of the sun, and the subtle absurdity of noticing something so small in a world so large. There were routines in that life that now feel oddly precious. The feel of keys in your hand as you unlocked doors to the building, the faint click of the lock mechanism, and the soft resistance of handles worn by countless others before you. Each sensory detail grounded you, made the world tangible, and offered a rhythm to which you unconsciously synced. You recall pressing the elevator button one more time, noticing a smudge on the panel, and thinking that no one would ever know who left it, but that somehow, in a quiet, imperceptible way, it mattered. There was a subtle humor in this anonymous interaction, the idea that small actions leave marks, unnoticed but persistent, much like the faint hum of the generator now reverberating under your feet. Before this, you remember the subtle rhythms of public transportation, the uneven comfort of seats, the soft vibration of engines, and the smell of asphalt warmed by the sun. You recall watching a child tug at a parent's sleeve, fascinated by the rhythmic pattern of wheels on tracks, or the subtle gleam of rainwater puddled on metal rails. The world was alive, but alive in quiet, ordinary ways, small moments that mattered more in memory than they did in practice. You recall your own absurd thoughts then, wondering if someone, somewhere, might notice the peculiar shape of a shadow cast by a lamppost, or the precise angle of sunlight on a building's window. Humor existed in the mundane, dry, and understated, a private acknowledgement of life's curious repetitions. There were other jobs, too, places you worked in cities that now feel distant and faintly unreal. A small library tucked into a quiet corner, the faint scent of warm paper, polished wood, and dust that always seemed to linger even after hours of cleaning. You remember the soft click of pages turning, the almost imperceptible shuffle of footsteps along the aisles, and the quiet amusement at misfiled books that would always, eventually, find their proper place. There was a gentle rhythm in these tasks, the sort that made the passage of time almost invisible. You recall small observations of patrons, a child peeking curiously at illustrations, an elderly man tilting his head to decipher a fine print, the librarian humming softly to herself. Each moment contained its own understated humor, subtle, observational, but undeniably human. Even in moments of solitude, life carried a quiet absurdity. You remember leaning against a railing, overlooking a deserted plaza after work, watching pigeons gather in orderly chaos, their movements precise yet unpredictable. A stray newspaper landed near your feet, the headline announcing something you couldn't remember caring about. You recall laughing softly at the minor absurdity, the interplay between order and chaos, between human intention and the indifference of the world. These small, ordinary interactions, unnoticed by most, accumulated into a rhythm you now recognize as grounding, a quiet lesson in presence. And so, before this responsibility became yours, you existed in worlds defined by minor textures, soft humor, and quiet observation. You carried the scent of coffee, the feel of worn keys, the warmth of sunlight, and the occasional absurdity that life provides without asking for permission. These memories are softened by time, neither sharp nor aching, but present in their gentle persistence. They remind you that life's ordinary details, its smells, sounds, textures, and subtle absurdities, form the scaffolding upon which everything else rests. Now, as you stand in the generator room, these distant ordinary moments fold softly into your present. The faint hum of machinery, the warm metal beneath your fingertips, the low vibration beneath your boots, they all echo the rhythms of a life quietly lived elsewhere. You smile faintly at the humor that persists across time, the odd consistency of machines, the subtle quirks of human rituals, the improbable little events that leave soft imprints in memory. You realize that the distance traveled, the quiet drift from one life to another, is not loss but accumulation, a gentle layering of experience that anchors you here, fully present, fully aware, and quietly amused. You find yourself lingering near the small alcove tucked against the far wall of the generator room, a corner you have claimed quietly as your own. The light here is softer, filtered through the slightly tinted panels above, and the floor beneath your feet is warmer than the surrounding metal grates. At first glance, it appears unremarkable. A narrow counter lined with tools, a single worn chair tucked beneath, and a small stack of notebooks with pages slightly curling at the edges. Yet somehow, this tiny space has become a grounding point, a place where the world slows and the hum of the generator settles into a rhythm you can follow effortlessly. You rest a hand on the edge of the counter, feeling the faint warmth of metal beneath your fingers. It carries the memory of countless hours spent here, adjusting dials, jotting notes, and tracing lines of circuitry. The texture is familiar, almost intimate, like a handshake you've exchanged with the world countless times. A small lamp casts a soft circle of light over the surface, illuminating the notebooks just enough to reveal neat, precise handwriting and faint sketches of diagrams you have long since internalized. There is a quiet absurdity in noticing the way a paperclip has stubbornly clung to the corner of a page for years, surviving dust, air currents, and countless shifts of the generator's hum. A single cup rests beside the notebooks, its ceramic surface slightly chipped at the rim. You lift it carefully, noting the faint scent of dried coffee lingering within. It's not fresh, and you don't mind. The subtle aroma carries with it the memory of a morning spent adjusting settings while the world outside slowly roused itself. There is humor in the fact that the cup has endured more than most visitors would expect, a minor act of resilience in a room built for function rather than comfort. You place it back gently, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the counter, and let your eyes drift to the small array of tools hanging above. Each has its place, worn by repeated use, marked by tiny scratches and the faint warmth of past handling. You recognize them individually, not for their function alone, but for the quiet reliability they offer, their subtle insistence on being present when needed. The chair beneath the counter has a soft cushion, slightly flattened in the center from long hours spent perched while monitoring the generator. You test it lightly with your hand, noting the way it absorbs pressure in predictable ways, and you let a small, dry thought cross your mind. Even in a world defined by efficiency, comfort finds a way. Sitting here, you can feel the vibration of the generator through the floor and into the frame of the chair, a constant, grounding pulse that aligns with your own breathing. The world outside seems distant, abstract, and irrelevant. Here, in this small space, every detail has meaning, and every texture offers reassurance. Your gaze shifts to a small, nondescript box tucked behind the chair. Inside are minor implements, replacement fuses, and a few stray screws that you have collected over time. Each item carries its own quiet story, a screw that once fell from a panel you were adjusting in a hurry, a fuse replaced after a generator hiccup, a tool handle polished by repeated handling. You run your fingers across them, noting the differences in texture, weight, and subtle imperfections. There is humor in imagining that these tiny, overlooked items might gather together in the quiet of night, comparing notes on the various panels and switches they have encountered. The wall above the counter holds a small, slightly crooked whiteboard. Notes are scrawled across it in dry, precise handwriting, reminders of tasks long since completed and observations meant only for yourself. One line reads simply, "Check the blinking light, again." You smile faintly at the persistent repetition, amused by the absurdity that a single indicator could become such a quiet antagonist in your daily routine. Another note marks the date when the generator first hummed steadily after weeks of careful adjustment, a subtle, triumphant record of achievement in the smallest possible units. The whiteboard is a mirror of your attention, dryly humorous in its exactness, yet deeply comforting in the ritual it represents. A narrow window looks out onto the adjacent control room, the glass slightly fogged at the edges. Through it, you can catch glimpses of distant panels and faint lights blinking in rhythm, each signaling life and function. You trace your fingers along the ledge beneath the glass, noting the cool smoothness that contrasts with the warmth of the counter. Outside, shadows move slowly as workers pass in muted coordination, their presence distant but grounding, a quiet confirmation that the world beyond your small space continues along its own rhythm. You lean against the ledge, inhaling deeply the mingled scent of metal, faint ozone, and the persistent warmth of machinery, letting it seep into your awareness. Among the notebooks, you notice one that is slightly dog-eared, pages filled with observations, minor sketches, and small annotations about the generator's behavior. You flip through it slowly, the soft rustle of paper harmonizing with the hum of the machine. Each entry is deliberate yet mundane, a record of ordinary attentiveness, notes on temperature fluctuations, timing, and minor anomalies. There is a subtle humor in some entries. Generator flickered. Blamed caffeine deficiency. You let a quiet laugh escape, recognizing the absurdity and the honesty in the observation. These pages are not a diary in the traditional sense. They are a map of presence, a collection of careful attention and personal reflection. A small metallic tray rests near the edge of the counter, containing a few personal items, a pen, a stopwatch, and a tiny keychain with a symbol you do not fully remember acquiring. Each object carries a quiet weight, not sentimental in the dramatic sense, but grounding, anchoring you to this space and to your own rhythms. You lift the pen, feeling its familiar balance and slight warmth, noting the dry humor in how much trust a simple tool can inspire in someone who has spent long hours in isolation. The stopwatch ticks softly, a subtle companion, while the keychain rests in silence, an enigmatic presence that might be entirely ornamental or entirely necessary, depending on how closely you pay attention. You sit down in the chair, finally, letting your back rest against the softened cushion. The vibration of the generator pulses beneath you, steady and unwavering. Your hand drifts to the counter, brushing across the notebooks, the cup, the pen, and the small tools, acknowledging the quiet interplay of objects that have become extensions of your routine and your presence. There is a sense of order here, not imposed but discovered, a small harmony in the careful arrangement and the steady rhythms of use. You feel the subtle pleasure of presence, of observing, of being quietly witnessed by the objects that form this space. The warmth of the lamp, the faint hum of electricity, the smell of metal and soft solvent, the slight vibration underfoot, all combine into a small, coherent universe. You allow a dry, private thought. If anyone were to come here and understand these objects, they might mistake the meticulous arrangement for obsession, not realizing it is simply comfort, companionship, and quiet humor arranged into a tangible form. Each item offers a soft reassurance that the world, though vast and unpredictable, can be navigated one small, deliberate step at a time. You close your eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the lamp and the generator, the faint aroma of metal, and the quiet, dry humor of your own observations merge. This space, these objects, the soft pulse of energy, they anchor you in the present, providing a stillness that is both deliberate and effortless. Here, you are fully aware, fully calm, and quietly amused by the minor absurdities that persist even in machinery and routine. This small alcove, this counter, this chair, these pages, these tools, they are the quiet center of your world, the steady heartbeat beneath the larger hum of life, offering a soft, unwavering anchor to the rhythm of your existence. If you've been enjoying this quiet journey so far, consider subscribing to Quilloren Radio. Each story, every hum of machinery, and every small observation is designed to guide you gently through calm, reflective moments. Staying connected helps us continue creating these spaces of stillness and subtle humor, where you can pause, breathe, and simply exist alongside the quiet rhythm. As you settle into the alcove near the generator, your mind drifts quietly toward paths once considered, doors left unopened, and the soft, persistent hum of possibilities that never quite became realities. You think of the small, gentle dreams that never demanded urgency, but lingered in the background like a persistent note in a quiet song. Perhaps it was a skill you had meant to practice, a place you intended to visit, or a fleeting idea that lingered in notebooks now forgotten. The thoughts arrive softly, like distant echoes, never insistent, only persistent enough to invite reflection. You wonder if, had you acted differently, life might have looked subtly altered, though not necessarily better or worse. You picture a kitchen from long ago, hands dusted with flour, the faint scent of sugar and warmth surrounding you. The idea of becoming a pastry chef, something that once flickered gently in your mind, surfaces now with a soft humor. You never pursued it seriously, the thought always drifting beneath the layers of daily obligations and practicality. And yet, you can feel the imagined warmth of dough between your fingers, the slow, rhythmic kneading, and the quiet satisfaction of shaping something that brings comfort to others. A gentle, self-aware laugh rises as you realize that even whisking pancake batter now leaves you winded, yet the thought is no less delightful. You drift to the idea of travel, the gentle longing to see streets, buildings, and skies, unfamiliar, yet somehow inviting. There were cities you once imagined walking through, feeling the texture of unfamiliar pavements underfoot, listening to conversations that carried different rhythms than your own. You never went, and that's not a regret, only an observation, a quiet acknowledgement of the life that remained just within reach but never touched. The memory of folding a map in small hands, tracing streets with fingertips, creates a soft sense of amusement, realizing that your fascination with these places existed more in contemplation than in action. Perhaps you had considered studying something entirely different, a subject that never became part of your daily life but lingered in the corners of thought. The quiet, methodical curiosity that once nudged you toward books, notes, and diagrams now settles gently alongside the rhythm of the generator. You imagine yourself reading, annotating, learning in a calm, steady cadence, the faint hum of machines now and then harmonizing with turning pages. There is no longing or bitterness in the image, only a soft curiosity, a gentle what-if that allows you to acknowledge paths not taken without insisting on their importance. You reflect on personal relationships that unfolded quietly, the ones that never carried dramatic tension but offered subtle companionship. A neighbor's smile, the faint acknowledgement of a coworker across the room, a brief conversation that left no mark on history yet created a tiny, persistent warmth. You consider what might have been if you had allowed yourself more initiative in those moments, more openness to small acts of connection. The thoughts arrive with calm humor, imagining conversations rehearsed in silence, ideas you would have spoken aloud only to find them unnecessary, or perhaps noticed only by you. There is also a subtle consideration of life choices, the decisions made with careful thought or quiet default. You never moved to a city that called softly from brochures, never took a course that promised knowledge you were only half curious about, never entered a line of work that might have felt more thrilling. And yet you noticed that the quiet paths you did take allowed for deep attention, patience, and observation, the kind that the generator room now rewards. A dry smile curves your lips at the irony. The life that seemed so ordinary at the time now feels like an accumulation of perfect, small, and steady choices, each with its own understated humor. The notion of creative pursuits drifts into thought next. Perhaps you had imagined painting, writing, or crafting in ways that required time you never freely possessed. You picture a small studio, sunlight pouring across a blank canvas, a brush trembling between fingers, or ink pooling quietly at the end of a nib. The faint hum of the generator now seems to echo the rhythm you would have carried in that creative space, deliberate, steady, slightly absurd in its own persistence. You smile quietly at the thought that perhaps the practice would have been frustrating, messy, yet oddly satisfying, an experience that never arrived but exists fully in quiet imagination. You consider the slow accumulation of skills, small competencies left untouched or partially explored, The possibility of learning a language, mastering a technical tool, or exploring culinary techniques all linger softly as gentle what-ifs. They carry no weight, no insistence, only curiosity that settles alongside the hum of machinery. You imagine yourself practicing, failing slightly, laughing quietly at mistakes, and gradually mastering the skill without urgency. There is subtle humor in imagining yourself in repeated, inconsequential failure, yet the scene is warm, soft, and fully inhabitable in thought. Then there is the reflection on movement through spaces you once knew intimately. Streets that now exist only in memory, buildings whose corners you traced absent-mindedly, hallways you walked with purpose but little attention. You picture yourself gliding past familiar markers, imagining the alternate life in which those spaces were lived in fully, in deliberate observation rather than routine. The reflection is calm, measured, and humorously absurd at times. How a misplaced bicycle or an overgrown shrub could alter the entire imagined narrative in ways both inconsequential and quietly fascinating. You let these what-ifs settle into a gentle, unhurried rhythm. The generator hums steadily beneath you, a companion in both presence and reflection. You feel no urgency to act on these thoughts. They exist purely for the experience of noticing, observing, and quietly acknowledging what might have been without needing to become reality. There is a subtle amusement in the improbability of some imagined scenarios, a pastry kitchen in a city you never visited, a language half learned, a skill practiced and abandoned, yet none of them carries tension or frustration, only the soft texture of thought and memory. A faint vibration from the generator rises slightly as a panel clicks in sequence, and you notice it with a gentle smile. The real and imagined coexist easily here, the present with its warmth, hum, and small movements, and the drifting possibilities, standing like shadows alongside the reality you inhabit. You wonder quietly if any of these latent dreams would matter if pursued today, or if they exist most clearly as imagination, unburdened by expectation. The thought carries subtle humor. Perhaps you would still be winded from whisking pancake batter, still amused by machinery, still observing small absurdities with the same quiet attention you have now. The what-ifs eventually fade, leaving only a soft curiosity in their place, like an unfinished sentence that never demanded completion. You breathe slowly, noticing the rhythm of the generator, the warmth of metal beneath your hands, the subtle shift of air across your skin. The mind quiets, leaving the gentle residue of imagined paths, softly humorous observations, and lingering recognition that life, in all its ordinary textures, has provided exactly the kind of stillness and reflection that you now inhabit. The generator hums beneath your feet, steady and uncomplaining, a perfect counterpoint to the drifting possibilities that once lived in your imagination. You notice a small, dust-flecked box tucked into the corner of the generator alcove, partially hidden beneath a coiled cable. Its presence is unassuming, almost accidental, but it calls your attention with a quiet insistence. You kneel down slowly, brushing the surface gently, feeling the cool metal under your fingers. The latch clicks softly as you open it, revealing an assortment of objects, each distinct yet equally unremarkable at first glance. There are letters, photographs, small trinkets, and oddities collected over years, perhaps left by past visitors or gathered by yourself in quiet moments of curiosity. The box is a microcosm of memory, a time capsule that neither demands attention nor explains itself fully, yet offers a wealth of quiet stories to explore. The first item you lift is a photograph, slightly curled at the edges, depicting a street corner bathed in late afternoon light. You notice the uneven shadows of trees across the pavement and the faint blur of a passing cyclist, the image almost too ordinary to hold significance. Yet in its ordinariness, there is depth, the subtle angles of light, the way the air seems to settle around the buildings, the small human presence rendered almost incidental. You imagine a story behind the photo, someone pausing mid-step, distracted or amused, but you do not need to know. The quiet humor of imagining their intent lingers, soft and unhurried, as you set the photograph aside carefully. A folded note sits next to it, yellowed slightly with age. The handwriting is small and deliberate, the words simple. Remember the coffee on the balcony, morning sun, and the wind teasing the curtains. You smile faintly, noting the understated absurdity of the specificity. The note does not carry sentimentality beyond observation. It simply records a small, personal detail, a snapshot of presence. You feel the texture of the paper beneath your fingertips, the slight resistance of creases, the faint roughness that comes from repeated handling. Even the smallest imperfection in the paper feels like a companion, quietly attesting to the passage of ordinary time. Next, you lift a tiny metallic charm, shaped like a miniature key. It is cool to the touch, smooth along the edges, and carries a faint weight disproportionate to its size. You turn it in your fingers, noting the slight dents and scratches, imagining the doors it could have once unlocked or simply represented. There is gentle amusement in thinking about all the impossible keys you have encountered in life, each one a minor puzzle, a possibility that never fully materialized. The charm is quiet, unassuming, yet in its presence, it holds a sense of continuity, a small anchor to events and choices that remain partially obscured but entirely significant in their silence. Among the objects is a small vial, capped tightly, containing sand of a color that seems unremarkable at first glance. You shake it lightly, noting the faint sound as grains collide within. The sand could be from any place, collected impulsively or purposefully preserved, but its origin matters little. It evokes the soft sensation of sifting through time, imagining footsteps along an unfamiliar shore, the warmth of sun-baked grains beneath bare skin, or the chill of a breeze that carried distant sounds. You smile faintly at the notion that a handful of sand could serve as both artifact and vessel of imagination, a reminder that ordinary elements often hold quiet depth. A small worn keychain rests nearby, shaped like a bird mid-flight. The paint is chipped, revealing bare metal in subtle patterns, and you feel a gentle humor in imagining the bird perpetually frozen in motion. Perhaps it belonged to someone who carried it on a set of keys, or perhaps it was a trinket purchased on a whim. Its story is incomplete, yet it prompts reflection. The bird's suspended flight mirrors moments in your own life, ordinary and fleeting, yet quietly memorable. You let it rest back in the box, appreciating its presence without demanding meaning, content in the ambiguity it offers. You notice a folded ticket stub, edges frayed and slightly stained. The print indicates a modest event, perhaps a concert, a lecture, or a screening, though the details have faded with time. You hold it lightly, imagining the space it once granted you, seats filled with faces, the soft echo of conversation, the faint scent of food and fabric. Humor arises as you consider the triviality of such a moment in retrospect, yet you feel gratitude for its inclusion in this curated collection of small, private histories. The stub is a reminder that ordinary experiences, while seemingly inconsequential, carry the potential to linger as textures in memory. A tiny notebook, no larger than a matchbox, rests under the ticket. Its pages are filled with illegible scribbles, shorthand, and occasional recognizable words. You flip carefully, feeling the uneven texture of ink against paper, the faint resistance of well-worn bindings. The entries are fragmented, a quiet testimony to moments captured in haste or leisure, perhaps intended for recall, perhaps simply for the act of writing. The notebook does not demand understanding, only observation. You smile at the private absurdity of someone recording minutiae, and in that humor, you feel a kinship with the anonymous chronicler. A small coin appears next, slightly tarnished, with a symbol you recognize vaguely but cannot place. It is heavier than expected, cold and smooth along the edges. You roll it gently between your fingers, noting the faint imprint of design and the soft weight that carries a sense of history. Humor arises in imagining the coin changing hands countless times, traveling across lives, gaining stories you will never know. Its presence in this box, alongside photographs, notes, and trinkets, underscores the quiet unpredictability of human action, the small interventions and accumulations that create texture over time. Among the objects, a piece of fabric lies folded, faded, and soft to the touch. The weave is uneven in places, suggesting handwork, perhaps a patch from clothing or a fragment preserved for a reason lost to memory. You feel its warmth and faintly rough edges, imagining its movement against skin, the subtle sound of it brushing against surfaces, the ordinary intimacy of touch now preserved as artifact. There is dry amusement in picturing yourself, explaining the importance of this fragment to anyone else. Its value is entirely internal, a quiet secret shared between you and the objects themselves. You lift a small figurine, no taller than your thumb, depicting a creature caught mid-leap. Its expression is neutral, yet something in the angle of limbs and the tilt of its head inspires a faintly humorous interpretation. You imagine it frozen in an impossible leap, defying gravity, purpose, and expectation, a miniature symbol of suspended absurdity. The figurine rests back in the box, its story unresolved yet entirely vivid in the small mental space you have created around it. Finally, you notice a folded sheet of paper with a faint pencil sketch, simple lines forming the outline of a building, perhaps familiar, perhaps imagined. The sketch is unassuming, lacking detail yet fully suggestive, leaving room for interpretation. You consider the humor in imagining someone trying to recreate the building from memory, failing slightly, producing a version that is both recognizable and subtly flawed. There is comfort in this. Small imperfections, quietly observed, holding more truth than precise replication ever could. As you close the box gently, you notice how each item's quiet presence lingers in your mind. The letters, photos, trinkets, and sketches do not demand story, emotion, or attachment. They only invite observation, reflection, and a subtle, dry humor in imagining lives intersecting, ordinary and absurd in equal measure. The generator hums steadily beneath your feet, the alcove quiet around you, and the collection of objects becomes a tapestry of soft memory and minor absurdities, unassuming yet rich with the texture of small, private histories. You lean back in your chair, allowing the faint hum of the generator to guide your thoughts outward, beyond the immediate warmth and textures of the alcove. Time seems to stretch easily here, a pliable fabric that you can fold in on itself without pressure or urgency. You find yourself wondering about the distant future of this space, not with anxiety but with calm curiosity, the kind that lets questions float gently without demanding answers. What will this room look like 30, 40 years from now? Will the hum of the generator be replaced by something entirely different? Or will someone else, long after you, sit in this same chair, observing minor absurdities and small, comforting rhythms? You imagine the walls of the room, smooth and metallic now, subtly altered by decades of use, softened by time, or replaced entirely with materials unfamiliar to you. The panels might carry the faint patina of past caretakers' hands, or perhaps the technology will be so advanced that no one will ever need to touch them. You consider the humor in imagining a future worker meticulously arranging tools, notebooks, and cups, just as you do, unaware that these actions mirror choices made decades earlier. The generator itself may have evolved into something smaller, quieter, more efficient, or entirely virtual, yet the rhythm it provides, the pulse beneath your fingertips, may endure, a subtle constancy in a changing world. You drift further, picturing the lighting above, currently soft and functional, transformed by technology you cannot yet conceive. Perhaps it will glow in gentle gradients, responding to movement or presence, or maybe it will simulate sunlight and shadows for the comfort of workers who never see the real sky. You allow a faint smile at the thought that, even with advanced lighting, someone might still notice the odd flicker in a corner or the misalignment of a panel and consider it quietly amusing, the same way you observe imperfections now. The humor is subtle but persistent, a gentle thread weaving continuity across generations of caretakers. Outside this space, you consider the building that houses the generator. Will it still exist, preserved in careful maintenance, or repurposed for entirely different functions? Perhaps the streets around it will shift, new pathways forming over the old, and yet some faint echoes of human presence will remain. You imagine future workers navigating hallways and staircases that once felt familiar, now strange and slightly disorienting. Their experience mirrors yours, a quiet navigation of ordinary details, minor absurdities tucked beneath the weight of routine, and subtle observations of a world that has changed, yet remains fundamentally human in its imperfection. The idea of the people themselves comes to mind. Will they be as patient, careful, and quietly amused by minor quirks as you are? Perhaps someone will discover the alcove and the collection of objects you've tended, finding humor in the small imperfections of alignment, the faintly absurd notes, and the deliberate attention to otherwise ordinary tools. You consider the delight in shared observation, the continuity of human attentiveness, and the quiet humor in knowing that even decades later, someone might notice the subtle rhythm of a paperclip stubbornly clinging to a page, or a cup chipped at the rim. You imagine further that some of the tools, panels, and notebooks may be replaced entirely. New materials, new designs, new systems will enter the space, yet some habits may remain universal. The gentle care of handling equipment, the curiosity to note minor anomalies, the humor found in inconsequential inconsistencies, all of these may persist, carried forward by human nature rather than technology. You consider the absurdity of imagining a future worker pausing to adjust a faintly crooked panel or smiling at a blinking light, their sense of quiet humor bridging decades and connecting the small, ordinary details of life across time. Even the sounds of the space may evolve. The generator's hum might transform into a different frequency, a digital vibration, or perhaps a silent system entirely, leaving only subtle cues of its function. You allow a faint smile at the possibility that someone might miss the familiar vibrations beneath their boots, a small absence that becomes noticeable only in reflection. The interplay of sound, touch, and presence, the trifecta that anchors you now, may manifest differently in future decades, yet the essence of observation remains. Human attention persists, quietly calibrating to whatever rhythm emerges, finding comfort, amusement, and grounding in the ordinary. You consider the objects themselves, cups, notebooks, trinkets, and sketches that you have carefully arranged and tended. Will they survive the passage of decades, tucked into drawers, forgotten boxes, or repurposed by future inhabitants. Perhaps some will remain intact, subtle witnesses to human life and attention, while others vanish entirely. Humor comes quietly as you imagine someone opening a long, forgotten drawer and finding a chipped cup or a keychain, momentarily amused by its persistent, inexplicable presence. These objects, like memories, will outlast immediacy, leaving traces of ordinary life for observers who may never know the full context. You drift toward imagining how rituals, small routines, and ordinary interactions may evolve. The soft notes on a whiteboard, the deliberate placement of tools, the faintly absurd attention to minor detail, these may persist as quiet human habits even as technology transforms the mechanics of life. You imagine a future worker pausing to align a pen or check a blinking light, discovering subtle humor and quiet satisfaction in the act, unaware that their behavior mirrors the attentiveness you have practiced. Time, here, becomes a soft loop, a gentle continuity of care, observation, and minor amusement across generations, a rhythm that quietly endures. You allow yourself to wander further into abstraction, imagining distant decades when this place may no longer serve the same function. Perhaps the building itself is replaced by greenery, urban projects, or new construction. The generator may exist only in digital archives, the hum reproduced as a recording for historical study or ambient purposes. Yet, even in absence, the memory of the space, the small objects, the routines, the faint absurdities remains. You picture future observers piecing together traces of ordinary life, finding humor in the imperfection of documentation, and discovering the quiet rhythms that humans have always brought to even the most functional of spaces. There is a soft awareness that in this far reflection, the past, present, and future interweave seamlessly. You notice the absurdities of life gently persist. Chairs that sag, lights that flicker, paperclips that cling stubbornly, notes that remain unexplained. These small elements carry subtle humor, continuity, and human presence across decades. You breathe slowly, the generator humming beneath your feet, and recognize that observation, care, and quiet attention are timeless, inhabiting spaces no matter how technology, architecture, or circumstance evolves. The room may change, the lights may differ, the panels may evolve, yet the human tendency to notice, reflect, and smile quietly at minor absurdities endures. You allow your thoughts to rest here, hovering between centuries, acknowledging the calm presence of yourself and others who may occupy this space in the future. There is no need to resolve questions or to pinpoint outcomes. Time stretches gently, carrying both certainty and ambiguity, rhythm and quiet humor, continuity and subtle change. The hum of the generator, once a small anchor beneath your feet, now resonates as a bridge across decades, connecting present care with imagined futures, ordinary objects with lasting presence, and subtle absurdities with the enduring human impulse to observe and reflect. You allow your mind to wander freely now, letting the hum of the generator form a gentle backdrop for quiet daydreams. They are not ambitions or urgent desires, but small, passing imaginings that exist purely for the pleasure of thought. You picture the alcove subtly transforming in ways that matter only to you. A flicker of light in a corner that always seems brighter. A tool that functions just a bit more perfectly than expected. A panel that opens silently with barely a touch. Each tiny change carries no consequence beyond its immediate observation, yet it produces a quiet sense of delight. You smile at the absurdity of noticing these things so intensely, while the world remains largely indifferent. Perhaps a cup on the counter tilts ever so slightly when no one is looking, just enough to suggest movement, yet it never spills. You imagine it balancing precariously, an almost playful interaction with the space itself. The notion is entirely harmless, the sort of observation that would be utterly unnoticed by anyone else, but feels significant in your private experience. You laugh softly at the imagined consequences, the cup tipping exactly enough to produce a gentle sound without causing a mess, a perfectly orchestrated moment of quiet whimsy that only you are present to witness. A subtle shift in the generator occurs in your imagination. The vibrations align with the rhythm of your breath, each pulse reinforcing calm and steady awareness. It is neither magical nor impossible, only a gentle possibility conjured by the mind when attention is undisturbed. You notice the interplay between thought and environment, realizing that even slight, improbable shifts can feel comforting. The absurdity is quietly amusing, a reminder that imagination can coexist with reality without disrupting it, adding a layer of texture to ordinary perception. You imagine the shadows along the walls, bending ever so slightly, forming fleeting shapes that vanish if examined too closely. One moment, a faint silhouette suggests a familiar object. The next, it dissolves into nothing. The humor here is subtle. The mind assigns narrative to nothing at all, finding amusement in impermanence and ambiguity. You allow yourself to linger on the shapes for a few breaths, noting their transience without expectation. The generator continues its steady rhythm, and the two, the imagined and the real, exist side by side without tension. Perhaps a tool on the bench operates on its own for a moment, shifting slightly as if it had a mind of its own. The motion is precise, deliberate, yet entirely imperceptible to anyone else. You observe it with gentle fascination, noting the humor in attributing agency to an inanimate object. In your mind, it has a personality, modest, efficient, slightly playful. The absurdity is comforting, a private joke played out within the bounds of ordinary space, a small pleasure born from attention, imagination, and absence of necessity. You let the air around you carry imagined scents, subtle hints of freshly oiled metal, warm coffee or sun, warmed concrete that could never exist in the alcove simultaneously. The combination is impossible but soothing, layering sensory richness into quiet fantasy. Each scent evokes a faint memory or feeling, not fully accessible yet entirely present in its suggestion. The mind's ability to merge disparate details, to craft plausible impossibilities, provides a gentle amusement and a soft reflection on how ordinary moments can be reframed by imagination. A faint light glimmers along the wall, as if the generator itself had chosen to shine differently. The warmth is subtle, comforting rather than intrusive. You consider the humor in imagining the machine with intention, deliberately responding to mood or thought. The generator hums steadily, entirely unchanged in reality, yet in this private daydream, it has character, a personality that aligns with the rhythm of your mind. You smile quietly, acknowledging the absurdity without judgment, enjoying the soft texture of the thought for its own sake. You imagine a panel on the wall sliding open to reveal a hidden compartment, exactly sized for a tiny notebook or trinket. The compartment exists solely in imagination, and the joy lies entirely in the discovery. You lift a miniature object from within, examining it with calm attention. It may be a key, a coin, or a note written in faint pencil, its contents trivial but utterly engaging. The humor is quiet. The object holds significance only to you, and yet it provides satisfaction, reflection, and amusement in equal measure. Perhaps a bird appears in the room, not realistically, but perched on a corner of the ceiling. Its presence is quiet, still, unremarkable in sound, yet it observes the space with curious detachment. You notice its feathers ruffling slightly with imagined air currents, its eyes attentive but not intrusive. Humor emerges as you consider the absurdity, a bird present only in thought, aware of its own fictive existence, perhaps judging the generator's hum or the neat arrangement of tools. You watch it for a few moments, before it drifts silently into a corner of imagination and disappears. You picture the alcove gently expanding, just enough to offer additional space for quiet reflection. Not so much that it changes fundamentally, only enough that you notice a subtle difference. The air feels softer, the ceiling slightly higher, the floor warmer underfoot. The change is imagined, yet it is entirely convincing in its texture, allowing you to inhabit the moment fully. The humor is gentle. You acknowledge that the world outside remains unchanged, yet this tiny expansion satisfies the private logic of thought, giving space for minor delight. A faint, imagined breeze moves across the room, rustling papers and shifting the edges of objects. It carries no chill, no scent, only the gentle suggestion of motion. You notice how even a subtle, impossible change can affect perception, heightening awareness of textures, colors, and small details. The quiet amusement persists. Nothing has altered in reality, yet the mind produces the sensation of difference, revealing that ordinary spaces can contain richness when attention and imagination collaborate. Finally, all imagined transformations fade, leaving a lingering sense of calm, amusement, and gentle possibility. The generator hums steadily beneath your feet. The alcove is quiet, and your thoughts settle into soft awareness of present textures, the warmth of metal, the slight resistance of paper under fingertips, the subtle vibration of machinery. You recognize the pleasure in small fantasies, the harmless delight in imagining minor transformations and improbable occurrences. They vanish without consequence, leaving the space unchanged yet emotionally enriched, a gentle exercise in observation, imagination, and quietly humorous reflection. The room is still. The generator hums steadily, a low, persistent pulse that feels almost like breath beneath your feet. You sink deeper into the chair, noticing the cool metal against your legs, the faint warmth of the air shifting around you. Every surface, the walls, the floor, the panels, is held in quiet equilibrium, carrying the soft weight of presence without demand. There is no need to move, to adjust, to think beyond the gentle awareness of what is here. The moment itself expands, breathing slowly, deliberately, and you find yourself merging with it, a single point of consciousness tethered to steady vibration, warmth, and stillness. The texture of the air is tangible now, slightly humid, subtly shifting with the faint pulse of machinery. You notice how the light falls in muted gradients, brushing across surfaces with no hurry, highlighting imperfection and wear in soft relief. Dust motes drift gently in the beams, neither obstructing nor distracting, merely existing as part of the quiet choreography. You watch them for several breaths, noting their undirected motion, their occasional collisions, the subtle glint of reflective edges. There is a peculiar calm in observing such tiny, purposeless activity, a sense of shared being, without need for comprehension. Your own breath deepens in response, slow and weighty, the rise and fall of your chest harmonizing with the hum beneath your feet. Each inhalation carries a subtle warmth, each exhalation a faint release. You notice the shift of clothing against skin, the slight indentation of your body in the chair, the unremarkable yet precise alignment of limbs that supports your quiet presence. The mind softens, no longer reaching outward or forward, but resting with the simple awareness of its vessel. Every thought that arises is noted without commentary, allowed to fade back into stillness. Hands resting on your knees, you feel the subtle textures beneath your fingertips, the faint scratches in metal, the irregularities of wood, the smoothness of plastic panels. Each surface offers a tactile dialogue, one that exists without expectation. You acknowledge them gently, the observations almost ceremonial in their patience, appreciating the ordinary intricacy that often goes unnoticed. The quiet humor of small imperfections surfaces faintly, a smile without laughter, a recognition of the improbable permanence of minor flaws in the machinery and environment alike. The chair beneath you seems to cradle rather than support, adjusting minutely to your weight, a silent, unremarkable comfort. Light continues to scatter softly across surfaces, illuminating the subtle warmth in edges, corners, and worn places. You notice the faint vibration from the generator, steady, reliable, and without urgency. There is no need to question its rhythm or stability. It simply exists, as do you, each motion synchronized in a gentle, unconscious acknowledgement of presence. The world narrows to this intersection of warmth, sound, texture, and breath. The air carries a subtle hum of temperature change, imperceptible except in the conscious noticing of skin and hair, of fabric brushing against extremities. You feel the soft weight of clothing against shoulders and arms, the way it yields slightly to movement even when there is none. The generator emits a constant resonance, a sound that has become a background pulse for thoughtless awareness. You begin to notice the faint difference in vibration along metal surfaces, the gentle echo of presence in corners, the small, unremarkable patterns of dust settling over hours, days, perhaps weeks. There is no urgency in noticing, only the steady unfolding of perception. Light and shadow merge in subtle gradations, neither stark nor abrupt. The edges of objects blur softly, corners softened by repeated attention, angles diffused into gentle transitions. You become aware of the chair's subtle creak, a sound once noticed in passing, now magnified through patient focus into a component of rhythm. Every minor vibration, every hint of movement, every faint variation in light or temperature, coalesces into a single, continuous experience. Nothing seeks to startle, nothing demands attention. All exists quietly, evenly, without commentary. Breath becomes more pronounced in stillness. Inhalation carries a faint warmth across lips, chest, and throat. Exhalation flows back into the ambient air, mingling imperceptibly with the cool metal and the hum beneath you. The generator vibrates in harmony with the slow, methodical rhythm of your lungs, forming a loop of unspoken correspondence. Your limbs relax fully, settling into the chair's contours, fingers loosening from subtle tension. The mind rests in observation, processing nothing, anticipating nothing, reflecting nothing beyond the present softness of being. You notice the faint resonance in the floor beneath your feet, a vibration traveling upward through ankles, calves, and knees. It is soft, but undeniable, a tether linking body and environment, grounding awareness in sensation. Fingers brush the smooth edges of the panels beside you, tracing contours with gentle pressure, noticing subtle dents, scratches, and temperature shifts. There is humor in noticing, small and deadpan, yet it carries no weight, only the acknowledgement of imperfection existing exactly as it should. Each minor discovery folds seamlessly into awareness, reinforcing the continuity of calm observation. The air hums with imperceptible currents, brushing over skin and fabric, circulating gently, without rush. Light shifts slowly in temperature and intensity, unhurried, unnoticed, except in the soft attention given. The generator continues its steady pulse, unwavering in tone or force. Every sensory element, touch, sound, warmth, light, becomes a thread in a quiet tapestry, each reinforcing the others without demand or urgency. There is no distinction between observer and observed. Self and environment merge into a single calm perception. You notice the dust motes again, now in quiet repetition, floating in paths dictated only by invisible currents. Their motion is gentle, unremarkable, yet intricate in complexity. You follow a single particle, tracing it with attention until it drifts beyond notice, only to be replaced by another, equally mundane, equally delicate. There is humor in the ordinariness of this attention, a subtle recognition of patience applied without expectation. Breath, hum, warmth, and texture remain constants, a continuous loop of quiet observance. Finally, all movement slows further. The chair, the light, the air, the generator, and your own body coalesce into a singular, undifferentiated presence. Thought softens to near absence, vocabulary reduces to its simplest forms, and sensory awareness remains, unhurried, complete, and weighty. There is no narrative, no finality, no instruction, only continuation, only presence. You and the room are indistinguishable, a gentle, unbroken continuum of calm, softness, and quiet awareness. Every element, the hum, the warmth, the faint textures, the subtle light, resides in equilibrium. Nothing needs to happen. Nothing is required. The self dissolves into the space, leaving only ambient sound, steady pulse, and complete stillness.